The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Yo, Philly, how yous doing? Welcome to Philadelphia Baseball, past, present, and personal. I'm Bill Kashatus, your host on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. This week, I'm pleased to have as my guest Clay Dalrymple, who caught for the Phillies from 1960 to 1968 and was instrumental in transforming the Phils from perennial losers to pennant contenders during that decade. Dalrymple completed his career with the Baltimore Orioles in 1971. He was known for his strong throwing arm and solid defensive skills. Clay led National League catchers in assists in 1963, 65, and 67, and set a league record with 99 consecutive errorless games in 628 chances during the 66 and 67 seasons. During his 12-year Major League career, Dalrymple threw out 48.8% of the base stealers he faced, second only to Roy Campanella on the all-time list. Welcome to the podcast, Clay.
Hey, Bill. Thank you. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Listen, in November 1959, you were drafted by the Phillies from the Milwaukee Braves in the Rule 5 draft. And you came to a very young and racially diverse team of white, black, and Hispanic players. Philadelphia was not the most racially tolerant city back at that time either. We know that Richie Allen, the team's first black superstar, was not treated very well by the hometown fans. Other black players like Johnny Briggs and Wes Covington also felt alienated by the white fan base. But on the other hand, the Phillies had a second baseman by the name of Tony Taylor, who won over the hearts of the fans, and other Hispanic players like Ruben Amaro and Tony Gonzalez also felt that they were accepted. Was this just a white-black issue, or was this something that was driven by the press?
I really, Bill, that's a great question. I get all completely very confused with what's happening in this current racism thing. Has gotten me completely buffaloed because, quite frankly, on our team, we didn't have a racial situation that much. Anyway, there might have been one or two players that didn't get along, but, you know, you could be the same race and not get along. That doesn't mean that it's racial.
Right.
I remember that Frank Thomas got in a fight with Richie Allen and because of something else that happened. But I think Richie kind of turned it into a racial thing because it was probably expected. You know, you probably thought that he was thinking racial. But quite frankly, there wasn't a lot of that stuff going on. I remember Dick Allen and I going to Milwaukee arm in arm, and we went after a day game there, and we went early in the evening to bar, and we're sitting in a bar having a drink, and we leave, and we're arm in arm, and he's calling me, "You white trash," and I'm calling him the N-word, and everybody's laughing like hell that's with us, except the people are giving me the whole sidewalk. I mean, they're going left and right around us. But Dick Allen and I were great friends, and we got along just super. I did not see a racially motivated anything. And quite frankly, I got along really, really well with the black players, whether they were from Cuba or whether they were from United States.
Mm-hmm. Now, we had talked some years ago about Richie, and he was a tremendous talent. You might be interested to know that there is a huge campaign to try to get him into the Hall of Fame, and we're hoping that 2020, which is the next time he's eligible on the Veterans ballot to be voted in, we're hoping 2020 is the charm for us. Tell us a little bit about Dick Allen as a baseball player, because you saw him early in his career.
Dick, when he was really, really young, was an infielder in second base, and he really didn't play that well at second base, but he was always full of charm, and always very, very talkative. But then when we got him in the major leagues, we had a power. He was our power hitter, man. I mean, he could clam down on the ball, as you all know, and he had such strong forearms and such strong upper arms that he could hit the ball all field, center field out of the ballpark, just as well as right field out of the ballpark. I envied his abilities. I really did. So they put him at third base, which he'd never played before, and it was really tough for him to have to pick up third base. You may realize and may know that he set a record for errors at third base his first year especially, and that's not surprising. But, we overlooked it. We still ran for the pennant. Even though he did that, he still guided us with his bat. And I think we overlooked the fact that he wasn't playing third base very well because he was just driving in so many runs. No, Dick Allen was a great guy and a good friend of mine. We swapped Christmas cards up until just about 10 years ago. We were sending Christmas cards to each other, and then he moved a couple of times. He's in Apple Valley, California, I believe now.
Mm-hmm. Actually, he's back east. He splits his time between Wampum and the Tampa St. Pete area.
Okay.
Remind me after the podcast. I'll give you his phone number because I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. Now your manager was Gene Mauch, who at age 34 in 1960, when he was hired, was the youngest skipper in the majors. He was a strong advocate of small ball, which emphasized offensive fundamentals such as bunting, sacrifice plays, and other ways of advancing runners, as opposed to try to scoring runs primarily through slugging. Mauch was also a strategist who sometimes overmanaged and could cost his team a game, but he was generally respected for his strategic abilities and even given the name Little General because of it. Do you agree with that assessment?
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty much so. I don't think there's anybody any better at substituting players one another and putting them where they were going to assist the ball club at that minute, at that time. I'll tell you where Gene's biggest fault was. His biggest fault and his weakest link, and it was never picked up on, was his pitching staff. Running his pitching staff, well, of course, he got nailed for what he did with bunting and short and coming down the stretch when we lost in '64. But his pitching staff, he didn't handle him at all. He didn't have bullpen ready. He relied on guys that he trusted, like Jim Bunning and Chris Short. He relied on them too heavily. He needed to spread it out and give the other guys more of an opportunity. Art Mahaffey and the whole group of guys, they were all had ability, and he really didn't give them the opportunity that they should have had.
I'm glad you brought up that pitching staff because it was a very impressive starting rotation during your years in Philadelphia, and having spoken with many of those guys, they credit you and your defensive abilities and game calling for much of their success. Now, obviously, the ace of that pitching staff was Jim Bunning, a future Hall of Famer at that time. But you also had Chris Short, Dennis Bennett, Art Mahaffey, and a young Rick Wise. The relievers included Jack Balshin, Ray Culp, and Bobby Shantz. Quite an array of talent there. Who was the easiest to catch for you?
I didn't have trouble catching anybody. There was no one that I really had trouble catching. I blocked the pitches well, and when you have a pitcher that throws a lot of balls in the dirt, that's usually your toughest pitcher. And we only had one in my whole career that did that a lot, and that was at Baltimore. And now that you've brought up a lot of those names, I need to tell you that at 81 years old, you forget names very easily. And the name that I'm trying to remember for Baltimore, I can't right offhand. but he was a pitcher that threw the ball, a big curveball. It went in the dirt a lot, and they wouldn't. He didn't want the manager Weaver wouldn't let the other catchers catch him because they couldn't block his pitch. So he let me catch him, and we hit the same. Our hitting ability, all the catchers were the same, but I never got to start, even though I got to catch the toughest pitcher in the lineup. I never got to start on a regular basis throughout. That was kind of weird. But anyway, as far as the Phillies were concerned, they were all fairly easy pitchers to catch.
Mm-hmm. Was that pitcher for the Orioles? Is that Hoyt Wilhelm or Dave McNally?
No, it wasn't either one of those. McNally was very easy to catch, and Wilhelm was a knuckleball. I never caught him at all. He was before me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, with the Phillies, Bunning was already established by the time he came over in 1964 from the Tigers. But, you had guys who came up through the Phillies organization like Short, Bennett, Mahaffey, and Wise. And it seems like, these guys never shook you off. I mean, you were definitely on the same page with these guys, at least when I was watching the games in the mid to late 60s. I never saw them shake you off, ever saw them.
Okay, Bill, let me tell you why. That is. The first thing I do when I get a pitcher in my staff, and I recommend this to all catchers that are catching today, young kids in high school especially, pay attention. When you're catching a pitcher, you learn to work his head and find out what he likes to throw. You learn to work his head and find out what he's comfortable throwing and when he's comfortable throwing it. Now, what you think is the right pitch and what that guy out there on the mound thinks is the right pitch could be two different pitches. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to be crossing him up all the time. There's an occasion where maybe he could shake you off and to get to the pitch he wants. But you need to read his mind as fast as you can. You find out how his thinking is, how he wants to pitch the hitters, how he likes to get them out. And you learn to run into that canal. And that's the way that pitcher will always say, that guy's one of the best catchers I've ever had. He thinks right the right direction. Now, you may have to do, with one left-handed pitcher, you're going to have to turn around and think the complete opposite as another pitcher. And a guy that has a great curveball, you're going to think differently than a guy that doesn't have a great curveball but only has a fastball. So all this works into one big conglomeration of there's not a certain way to pitch anybody. You have to pitch at somebody all the time according to what that pitcher can deliver to you, not what the manager, not what the pitcher thinks is right. What the pitcher thinks is right is what I'm trying to say. Is that's the way you go. Is what the pitcher thinks is right. That's the avenue you want to climb down. Rarely do you cross that up. Now, if you want to, and you're pretty sure that a guy wants to throw a fastball in a certain situation, and you know that's a bad situation to throw that fastball in, you may want to run out there and tell him, hey, be careful about throwing this pitch inside. This is power, and this is the count that he likes to have that fastball in. You make sure and keep it away from him, or you make sure and keep it on the outside corner. So those are the things to remember as a catcher.
I'm really glad to hear you say that because I went back to high school coaching this year after probably about 6-7 years away. I'd coached 25 years prior to that. And I'm out here near Williamsport in Millville, Pennsylvania, and a lot of my kids, they want to strike everybody out. And what I constantly say to them is, look, it takes 3 pitches at least to strike somebody out. You get a ground ball or a fly ball in 1 pitch. You don't want to go deep into counts. And then when they run into problems, I have a saying, which are conceive, believe, and achieve. Conceive meaning you have to visualize that pitch in the spot you're going to throw it before you even throw it. Then believe, throw it with conviction. Because if you're not going to throw with conviction, don't bother throwing at all. And then the last part of that is achieve. So, what you're telling me, and I wholeheartedly agree, having been a catcher, is that the catcher becomes this psychologist of the team. He's got to know not only what his pitcher can and can't do, but he's got to know what's inside that pitcher's head.
Exactly. Exactly. That's where your key of your being a catcher is. And you need to learn how to block the pitches. You need to learn how to save two-strike pitches that are going over somebody's head. You need to learn all that. But the key is getting along with your pitching staff, and that's very, very important.
Mm-hmm. Now, Clay, you played actually played before free agency, and it was a time when a player had to get a job in the off season because his baseball salary simply could not support a family. And I believe the average salary during the 1960s was somewhere between $5,000 and $12,000. Is that right?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, the minimum salary at that time was $7,000. Yeah.
$7,000. Okay.
And a lot of guys were making that.
So you had to have a job in the off season. Where did you work?
I worked for a gentleman by the name of Jim Prushankin, who was a manufacturer's representative in the plumbing industry. And I used to go around to plumbing wholesalers in Philadelphia, and I'd go from wholesaler to wholesaler, and not only would I meet the plumbers and talk to them, but I got to a point where I started working for Jim like a regular salesman. And I would start taking orders and bring them back to Jim to save him the trip in there that month. And he could stay in the office and work on other things. His territory covered not only Philadelphia, but also covered Harrisburg, clear to Harrisburg, clear up to Wilkes-Barre, and then clear down to Baltimore. So his coverage, his whole territory was large. And then once I got traded to Baltimore, I fit right in with his territory. I covered his Baltimore accounts for him, and I ended up working for an account there in Baltimore after I left Jim Prushankin. I went to work for an account there in Baltimore.
Wow. That was a smooth transition for you. I mean, I realized other guys were working at Sears and wherever else they could get a job, maybe a car dealership, whatever, but that sounds like it was a seamless transition for you from Philly to Baltimore.
It was, it wasn't troublesome at all for me. I fell right in line with the Orioles. They had a great ball club, and I got a high class roommate, Boog Powell. And then I remember one day Boog Powell and I were sitting in the dugout together in the spring training game, and this photographer comes by and he's got Brooks Robinson and Frank Robinson on each arm. And the guy looks down at Boog and sitting next to me, and he says, Boog, he says, come on, he said, I'm going to get your picture. He doesn't say anything to me. And so I'm sitting there, and Boog says, come on, roommate, go grab a bat. And I said, he doesn't want me, Boog. He doesn't want me. He says, roomie, get a bat. And I said, well, who's going to argue with Boog Powell? 275 pounds, okay. So I grab a bat. We go up there, and I said, this isn't going to take long. The guy's going to tell me to come back and take the bat and do what with it. And I go back, and the guy didn't have guts enough to tell me to leave. And he takes my picture with Frank and Brooks and Boog, and I didn't never see that picture until 4 years ago. Not 4 years later, 4 years ago.
Wow.
Some kid sent me this picture to be autographed. No one else had autographed. But there is Boog, there's Frank, there's Brooks, and there's Clay Dalrymple. And I looked at it, and I looked at it real close, and then all of a sudden I picked up something. Everyone had a big smile except Clay Dalrymple. He was looking like, what the heck am I doing in this picture?
Hey, that's a great picture to have, though.
I've got it up on my wall right now in my house. Yeah, it's a super picture. I love it.
Clay, there's another thing.
And my wife.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
There's another thing about the time period in which you played. The players were very accessible to the fans who adopted them as heroes. And you once told me a very moving account about a young blind girl who adopted you as her favorite Philly. Can you retell our listeners that story? Because it's a story about you took her around the bases after a game.
Yeah, Bill, I have 3 daughters, so it brings tears to my eyes every time I think of it. This young girl, she connected with me, and I don't recall exactly how she first did connect with me, but it was by phone, I believe. And then I found out that she was coming to a specific game, that I heard that she was listening to all the games on the radio. And then I heard that she was coming to a specific game and that she was going to be sitting in a certain area. Well, I went looking for her after the game, and I saw her, and she came over to the fence, to the short fence, and we talked, and I asked her to come out, and I wanted to usher her around the field. And so we get her over the fence, and I take her to home plate, and I let her stand on home plate, and then I walk her around the bases. And when I got all through, when I was finished, I didn't realize it. It was at the end of the game, but I didn't realize it. There was probably about, to the game, maybe 10, 12,000 people there. But by the time it was over with and we walked the bases, there was still 5,000 people in the stands, and they all gave me applause when I was through.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite heartening.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. You don't see that very much anymore at all. Now, Clay, I don't mean to be too discouraging, but I have to bring up 1964. Okay.
Yeah.
The Phillies were on the verge of capturing the National League pennant with 12 games left in the regular season. The Phils had a 6.5 game lead, only to lose 10 straight and end up in second place tie with the Cincinnati Reds, finishing 1 game behind the National League and World Series champion St. Louis Cardinals. I think you've already said, alluded to one of the things that happened, and that was Mock's dismal handling of the pitching staff. What else happened during that season to lose those 10 straight games at the end?
Oh, that was kind of interesting. There was going in the middle of that loss period. I remember we had men on first and second, and they were the tying and winning runs for the opposition. A ground ball double play for sure was hit right to Tony Taylor, and that ball hit something and took a bounce over his head. And it was like somebody was looking down on us and saying, "Hey, it's not your turn." And I think everyone kind of put their head between their legs and walked back to the clubhouse after that game was over with, because they knew that everyone knew that we weren't meant to win that game because of that. Mm-hmm. That game was with, I believe it was with Atlanta.
Mm-hmm. You mean Milwaukee?
I believe it was. Or Milwaukee, one of the two, I'm not sure.
Yeah,
But it was interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've talked to so many of your teammates, and they say the same thing. It just wasn't meant to happen. I mean, there were some inexplicable things that happened, during those games. That 10-game losing streak. I mean, things that never happened before, and most of them just chalked it up. It just wasn't supposed to be. And it was a young team. I mean, the only real veterans you had on that team were Bunning, who had pitched for Detroit. You had Wes Covington, who had played for the Milwaukee Braves. But Bobby Shantz came over. He, of course, pitched with the Yankees and the Philadelphia Athletics, but it was a young team. I mean, that was the first time they'd ever been in a pressure situation like that. So that's pretty
young team. Yeah, it was a young team, and quite frankly, Tony Gonzalez and Tony Taylor were two of the leaders of our club. Gonzalez, however, was not good at bunting, and he was only 160 pounds, but he was very strong in the arms. He could hit home runs to the opposite field too. He hit a lot to left field when he was a left-handed hitter, and he should have been pulling. Most left-handed hitters pull the ball, but he hit a lot of balls to left field, and most of his base hits were center field or left field. But Tony Gonzalez was very, very good with the bat, and Tony Gonzalez he's always stuck up for me. There was a catcher, and I can't remember his name, that we drafted got somehow in. I can't remember his name, but he used to give me fits, and one time he got up in the middle of a bus ride in San Francisco, between San Francisco and L.A., and he swung at me and clipped me with his right hand, and he had a World Series ring on, and it cut me. I remember that Tony Gonzalez got up to challenge him. Now, this guy weighed 230 pounds, and Gonzalez weighed 160. Wow. And Gonzalez got up and challenged him. He was going to fight him, because he hit me. I was well respected and well liked by the black players. I loved them to death. I thought there wasn't one of them I didn't get along with.
Mm-hmm. Now, Clay, you seem to have had a special ability for breaking up no-hitters against the San Francisco Giants. On July 19th, 1960, you broke up Juan Marichel's no-no with 2 outs in the 8th inning. I think that was his major league debut. You played the spoiler again on July 22nd, 1966, breaking up another no-hit bid again in the 8th inning, this one by Gaylord Perry. Do you remember the mistakes they threw you that you hit?
Well, Gaylord Perry was pretty much either a spitter or a fastball. He didn't have much of a breaking ball, a little tiny slider, but he didn't throw it often. Not to left-handed hitters anyway. But and I don't remember the Gaylord Perry base hit so much because I wasn't even aware that it was a no-hitter when I went up to hit. But I knew Marichel's was. And I was watching Marichel. I was cold in the bullpen in San Francisco. And when he called me in to pinch hit, I've been watching him throw strikes every pitch on the first pitch. Strike, 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 strike. And I thought, this game is not that far out where you need to take the first pitch. I mean, it was like he had a 2 or 3 run lead. I said, it's not a 5 or 6 or 7 run lead. This is a closer game. I said, if he throws that first pitch a strike to me, I'm going to hit it for a base hit because it's going to be a strike. Now, that's something as a hitter that you tell yourself with certain pitchers. There are certain pitchers that do things to you that you talk to yourself as a hitter about. And you don't have this advantage in high school because the pitchers are all brand new to you, so you don't ever know them. But I will tell you, kids in high school, that I teach my kids this, that as a high school pitcher, you always try to get ahead of your hitter. And it's not that easy to throw a strike. So consequently, they're going to try and throw the first pitch down the middle. And as a hitter, you look for the first pitch down the middle. If the first pitch is on the corner, don't swing at it. Take it. If it's down the middle, that's the one you want to crunch. The first pitch right down the middle. And that's what I tell my hitters all the time. And you know what? It sounds like it goes in one ear and right out the other, Bill, and you know that if you're coaching. They don't always hear what you're telling them. And you try to tell them year after year after year, and some of them get it, and very few of them do. Some of them just keep right doing what they're doing, even if it's wrong. We have one kid, he runs like a deer. He's so fast. This kid can run so well. All he's got to do is hit the ball on the ground in high school, and he's on base 50% of the time. He'll be on base 50% of the time. He runs left-handed, and he's down, zap. Makes contact. But he can't make contact. He swings way out in front of the ball and under the ball, or he pops it up. And I'm trying to tell him to hit the ball up the middle and wait for the ball and hit it up and back up to the pitcher. And you think I can get him to wait? Nope.
No.
I'm sorry. It's really unbelievable to watch kids. What were your question now? I think I got to pull away from it.
No. It was dealing with the breaking up the no-hitters, and I agree with you. I mean, the Marichal was first pitch. Oh,
yeah.
Right down the middle, you got to swing at that. So that's really great advice. We got some kids that, unfortunately don't follow that advice, and sometimes that's the only strike. That first pitch strike is the only one you're going to get in the at-bat. I tell my pitchers all the time, you want to get that first pitch strike. Because you don't want to set yourself down. Just a couple more questions.
Yeah, make it be a fat strike.
That's right.
Marichal threw me a slider, and it was in on my fist, and I liked to pitch in, but I already told myself I was going to hit the first pitch. I said it was going to be a strike. I knew it was going to be a strike, so I'm going to drive it somewhere. And sure enough, he throws a slider right over the heart of the plate, and I drove it back up the middle.
Wow. Now, Clay, you still had a lot of baseball left in you after that 68 season. Why did the Phillies trade you to the Baltimore Orioles? I could never understand that.
Because they weren't playing me anymore, and I had fallen into a slump in '66, and I had a real bad hitting slump. And the part of my slump was bad that no one picked up on. I found out later, but no one picked up on, is that when you hit, you have to cock the bat. It's like a carpenter when he's swinging a hammer. You have to bend your wrist when you drive a nail. You can't just take the hammer in your hand and go up and down with a hammer without bending your wrist, because that's part of driving the nail. Well, the same way with hitting. Your bat is what you got to bring it back in order for it to get rhythmic to the ball. And so you bring it back and cock the bat, and then you tap the ball. Well, I wasn't bringing the bat back. I was swinging it from a dead standstill. Wow. And I was swinging so late that I wasn't getting out in front of the ball. I was swinging way late on a pitch. And I couldn't hit the ball hard because I didn't have rhythm. So I was in a complete slump. I wasn't getting any hits because I couldn't hit the ball hard enough, and no one could tell me what I was doing. I mean, I had guys, Dick Grote on the team. I had guys that had long history of being in the major leagues. No one saw it. No one could see what I was doing, and that was the problem I had.
You know what? We call that.
Go ahead.
Back 45 to front 45. It's a 45-degree angle, and it forces you to take a shoulder-to-shoulder swing. And that is a common slump problem. And that's amazing. At that level, they did not pick that up. That's amazing.
They didn't pick it up, and it was just before they were taking pictures of your hitting. If they had taken pictures, I could have probably seen it myself, but they didn't take any pictures of me.
Well, that trade turned out to be a blessing in disguise. In 1969, you backed up Elrod Hendricks and Andy Etchebarren, helping the Orioles win the American League Championship before they lost to the Miracle Mets in the '69 World Series. But you made 2 pinch hitting appearances in that World Series, and you went 2 singles and 2 at-bats, and one of those, I think it was the first at-bat, came off Nolan Ryan in the 9th inning of Game 3, making you the only batter ever to get a base hit off Ryan in a World Series game. That is impressive.
You're kidding. I didn't know that.
That is impressive. So that Orioles team you played on, that was loaded. They were in and out of the series, I think, all 3 of those years. What was it like playing with those guys?
It was really outstanding. It really was. I had more fun playing with those guys, and even though I didn't start, even though I wasn't a starting catcher, I kept my mouth shut, Bill, because I saw we had such talent that I was going to get a World Series check at the end of the year. So don't be telling anybody that you should be starting. Just keep your mouth shut and sit on the bench. And that's what I did.
Mm-hmm. Well, they loved you in Baltimore because you stayed on after your career was over, and you were part of the broadcasting team, weren't you?
Yeah, I did. For a couple of years, I helped do the broadcasting, and it was fun. I enjoyed it a lot. Then my marriage dissolved, and I lost. When my first wife passed away, my marriage dissolved, and I got remarried, and it wasn't working out, and so I had to leave and come back to California, and that's one reason why I quit doing the baseball games.
Mm-hmm. Got one more question for you, Clay. By the way, you've been really generous with your time. Baseball is a very different game today than the game you played in the 1960s. Multi-million-dollar salaries, free agency, and analytics-driven strategies are only some of the changes. In your opinion, are these positive or negative changes?
It's hard to say. I really can't make a positive. If I was on the field, I'd be able to tell you better. But I can tell you by watching the games today that what they're doing with pitching has certainly helped it. They're pitching pitchers less innings and less pitches, and not letting them throw like 9 innings like they used to. And they're going to their bullpen more. So what they're really doing to strengthen the teams up is they're strengthening up the pitching staff. So there's always somebody out there that can throw hard and throw fresh. And that is really what helped the game, I think, more than anything else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, listen, thanks for being with us, Clay. Very insightful interview, and not only from the standpoint of your personal history in Major League Baseball, but also as a high school coach. I mean, there's some wonderful insights that you gave to our younger listeners, so thank you.
Well, I wish them all good luck. Play the game with an open mind and listen and try to learn as much as you can when you're in high school, because too much of that stuff that they tell you go in one ear and out the other. And I just want to tell them one thing to the catcher. When a catcher is throwing to second base, get rid of the ball out of your glove as fast as you can and be as accurate as you can to second base. You learn how to do those two things, and then you don't have to have a strong arm. Right. Your arm does not have to be completely where you tear the ball down, where it goes down to second base like 4 foot off the ground. That's not necessary. As long as that ball is flying in the air, it's going to go move faster than a base runner. But as long as you've got that ball in your glove, that base runner is taking flying steps about 10 or 12 foot long, and he's eating the ground up. So you get rid of the ball out of your glove and be accurate. And those are the key things in throwing to second base.
That's great advice. Clay, hold on to the line after I end this, and I'll give you that information I promised. Okay. Thank you, Philly fans. Thank you, Philly fans, for tuning in. See you next week for another podcast of Philadelphia baseball, past, present, and personal. This is Bill Kashatus, rounding third and heading home on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network.